Hey guys, it's Mr. White, and today we're going to talk about why all of your pictures have looked terrible for all of your life. We're going to learn about two real main concepts today. We're going to learn about exposure, which was a review of the last video. We're going to learn rule of thirds as well as leading lines. So I guess really we're going to draw on three concepts today. Now again, if you don't know about the magic rabbit, the rule of third, or the exposure triangle, that kind of stuff, go to the other video, check that out so you can learn about that. Well, today we're going to talk about why all of your pictures have looked terrible. First off, I want a quick review about exposure and primarily apertures. Remember, an f1.4 is a lot of light and an f16 is a little bit of light. Sometimes that gets confusing to a lot of people because it's the inverse. You think smaller should be a smaller amount of light, a higher number should be a higher amount of light, and it's actually the opposite. So keep that in mind as you are working through this over the next couple of days. Now, one of the keys in photography, the main key, controlling light. You have to be able to control light in order to be successful in photography. Now, one of the great things that you can do is practice. You have to practice photography a lot so that you get used to different situations and different scenarios. Now, one of the great things that you can do, you have a camera in your pocket. Take pictures all the time. Except in class, you'll get in trouble, get your phone taken away, all that stuff. But for the most part, take pictures all the time. Now, there's three things that affect the light in photography and definitely affect the magic rabbit that we talked about last week, which is the sensor inside the camera. The first is shutter speed. Think of the shutter as a door. The longer the door is open, the more people or more light can come through. The shorter amount of time that the door is open, the less light can come through. That's how I think of shutter speed. Shutter speed varies from bulb, which is basically as long as you want it to be open, to hundredths and 800ths of a second, that kind of stuff. So you can adjust that accordingly. That's usually the first thing that I adjust if something is too bright or too dark, just because it's the easiest. It's typically right there on top of your camera where your scroll finger is. The next thing is aperture. Think of aperture as a hose. The bigger the hose, the more light, the more water. Smaller the hose, less light, less water. And let's not forget our apertures here. I'm going to drive this home as much as I can because it is quite possibly the most confusing thing about photography and videography are the f-stops. An f1.4 or an f1 is much more light than an f16. See, I can't even say it right as I'm talking about it. So let's talk about a scenario where you have too much light and what you would do, or what the cause is. Shutter speed is too slow, potential cause. Aperture is too open, and the ISO is too high. The ISO, once again, is the computer sensitivity to light. The higher the ISO, the more sensitive it is. The smaller the ISO, the less sensitive it is. If you're shooting outside, it's a bright sunny day, people aren't really moving fast, ISO of 100 is totally fine. But if it's, say, a football game and you're just using the stadium lights and it's just not good and you're trying to catch these motions and freeze them, 6400 is the way to go. Now, if it's overexposed, if the picture is overexposed, it's going to look something like this. And this is not pretty. As you can see, this lovely couple, you really can't see details in their face. Notice here you can't see where their cheek starts. You can just kind of see a line right there. Ears completely gone, just looks like a flap of skin. That's what an overexposed picture looks like. Again, you correct that by changing your shutter speed would be my first suggestion. If that doesn't work, your aperture, and then finally reducing your ISO. Next, on our magic rabbit, is too little light. Your shutter speed's too fast, your aperture is too small, or your ISO is too low. Now, an underexposed picture sometimes gives a good creepy feeling, and sorry for you clown haters, but this is a great example of an underexposed image. Let me kill this light real quick so you can see it better. Notice the darkness. You don't have any separation in the hair on this side. On this face, you're losing a lot. In the neck and the shirt there, you're losing a lot. It makes for a good creepy picture, especially if you have creepy clown face woman. But for the most part, not the way you want to go. So exposure is the first thing, and that's just a technical thing. That's not an artistic thing. But if you have it right or wrong, it's going to look either good or bad. Now, in the example behind me with the creepy clown lady, in the example behind me, it helps with the factor. I had someone just walk in the door, they walked out. So sorry for the minor distraction there. And I'm not going to edit it, we're just going with it. So you can do artistic stuff with the exposure, but for the most part, you want to keep it pretty tame, especially as beginning photographers. Now these things are artistic things. How to take great pictures. Really two rules we're going to talk about today. The first is the rule of thirds. There's a really long definition. Looks a lot like this. Okay? The rule is, if you put everything in a framework that looks like this, your pictures will be better. You have the 4 main points here. These are the areas that you're looking to put interesting points in, your points of focus. Putting them there, there's a couple of reasons why that happens. One is that your eyes are naturally drawn to those 4 points on the screen. 2, it helps you to set up and build tension between things. In these examples you're going to see there's some definite tension and there's definite reasons for taking the picture this way. Now these are pictures that I've shot. The first one is from a football game. I'm going to kill the lights again so you can see it better. Now, what you have here, here's the rule of thirds. Was it a perfectly taken shot? Absolutely not. I was a little bit off on pretty much all of them, but you get the point. You've got the line here, so you've got the defender, and you've got the receiver here catching the ball. A couple of points also in this. You'll see that the scoreboard is here, right at the rule of thirds, and you can see that there is a point differential, fourth quarter, time, all that stuff. So you can draw in those pieces based off of the rule of thirds. If I had framed this just a little bit over and a little bit down, the player would have been right here on the point of the rule of thirds, the legs, and then this guy his head would have been there, and I wouldn't have had so much focus on the scoreboard. But in this instance, I did want the scoreboard to show the drama in that play. The next example here is from a baseball game. This is a much better example of the rule of thirds. There's several things going on here. First off, you have the batter and the umpire here at these 2 points, and you have the ball and the catcher. Notice that there's a space between the ball and the catcher's mitt. That's the drama point in that image. I wanted to show that distance between the two, so there's really 2 pictures here. Cut it right here. There's the draw between the catcher and the ball, and then the relationship between the batter and the umpire. But you put them all together and it makes a great image. Now, one of the things that you'll notice, we talked about shutter speed in class several times. Notice that ball's frozen. That ball's not moving. It is stuck, it is standard, it is not going anywhere. That's high shutter speed to freeze that ball. That's a baseball moving at a pretty good clip. One of the other things I want to talk about now, leading lines. Leading lines are great because they allow you to draw attention to your subject. In this example, here, let me give you the definition. Oh, come on, computer, there we go. Leading lines draw viewers' attention to the focal point of the image. I like to use environmental leading lines. In this example, you'll see my wife and children here on the bridge, and I have a lot of leading lines. So these lines are leading towards them. These lines of the wood are leading towards them. Everything draws the focus to these guys, okay? So a couple of things to keep in mind as we close. First off, make sure that you know your exposure triangle, the magic rabbit, the guy that lives inside the sensor. Also make sure that you understand the rule of thirds and why it's important. There are people who doubt the rule of thirds. I live by the rule of thirds, and there are people who call it the lazy suggestion or the lazy rule. That's fine. It helps me make better pictures. It helps me to think about, as I'm taking pictures, what I'm shooting and how that works. Also with leading lines, it makes me think about the entire image, not just the main picture. Look forward to seeing you guys in class. If you have questions, please don't hesitate to email me. You have my email. Send a message to this video or what have you. Have a great day.